that it is 1 point deduction to turn in your study set late, so it should already be uploaded on there. So if your study set looks like mine, where you just have answers and there's no work, or there's like really random work that makes absolutely no sense, I'd rather have you turn it in late and lose that 1 point. You can absolutely take notes, but I want you to go back and try it so that you get this. That's the purpose of the study set and me going over it. I don't expect that you get every single one perfect. You're going to get a 5 if you made your best effort and came pretty close. And you also lose a point if you're not here on Tuesdays. But if for some reason you can't be here on Tuesday, send me an email, and you'd have to come to an office hour on Thursday, so we make some kind of contact. With that, Thursday, yeah, this is me not listening to my intuition. I should have made the class Tuesday, Thursday. Thursday's not required. It is videotaped. And I do have a lot more office hours on Thursday just because of how my schedule runs. There were about 6 or 8 of you came on Thursday and worked on the lab 2, that was the factor label lab that you guys submitted. And so that also is a 1 point deduction to turn it in late. So there's a couple people who did email me and said, yeah, I'm going to take that 1 point deduction and I'm going to make time to come see you in the office hours. So the people who made the time last week, they got it. We worked a long time in this environment. It's pretty rough. That's a tough lab. And most students spend about 4 hours often with me present. So if you got less than like a 12 or 13 or 14, you can resubmit it, but you don't get to keep resubmitting and keep resubmitting. So if you need help, please make the time to come into an office hour and go over it with me so you get it. And actually, as we go through this today, I think you will start getting it, and that might help fill in some of the blanks of things you missed on the lab. Lab 3 is due Thursday. It is actually a kitchen chemistry lab, and my other class did it this past week. And then there's a page that's the post lab. So the most points that were missed was the post lab. So please make sure you take the post lab seriously. So you might want to work on it before Thursday. So if you have questions, you can come in and ask me. And you do have to take pictures. My other class is mostly females, and it's a nighttime, so they're mostly moms. So a lot of them were sending me like 15 or 16 pictures of their experiment. And you can do that if you're really thrilled with it, but try to limit yourself to like maybe 4 pictures. Blackboard on my end is a beast, and I've figured out some ways to get around it. This was a question that came up before class from Anthony. You have to make sure your assignment submits, because if there's a lot of people on Blackboard, which there are these days, sometimes it's really slow. And so he had a situation, he came on and said, why didn't you grade my quiz? And it turned out he had turned his thing off before it had uploaded. There was somebody else, that was my other class, and a similar thing happened on hers. I could see it was uploading, but there's nothing I can do on my end. And then most of you, at least on your lab and usually on the quiz, I usually write comments to you or mark things on the quiz as best I can in this atmosphere. So you can always come early. On Tuesdays, again, unfortunately, I can't stay after on Tuesdays because of how I had assumed that we would be live actually in person on Tuesdays, but our school has other thoughts about that. All right, so let's go ahead and walk through this. I recommend, again, that you use a colored pen to make notes to yourself as you're going through it. Oh, my other comment there is about metric, and hopefully I'll remember to talk about that because it shows up in all of these. But these are some questions that came up before class. These conversions, and again, it has to do with the environment we're in. You have to use these conversions to go between US and metric. You can't just Google and use anything random. And so it's one of the small pieces of control I can have over you to make sure you get this process down, because I know where we go with this over the next 2 months. The comments about metric shows up right here in the very first step. So there's only one piece of information given, and we're going to want to change centiliters to liters so I can get to quarts. It's nice to write down the unit you're trying to get to. And these are bridges between US and metric. And same like on the lab, you may have noticed on the homework, they progressively become more challenging. I would recommend, even those of you especially who were here last week, all of you, go back and redo the lab before your midterms in 2 weeks. Yeah, and make sure you've got this process down. So historically in the past on the midterm, the page that was like this, like your quiz today, and actually today's quiz, always everybody got full points on it because we had so much contact time. And so you're going to have to make that time. I do have an office hour this evening. I know it doesn't work for all of you, but you can come in to ask questions then. All right, we want to change centiliters to liters. And so this was a question, Michelle, you had asked me before class, and I recommend, this was from the lab, that you put this somewhere that you access it really easily. Next week, we'll be doing a review for the midterm, and I'll talk about like a page that you'll want so everything's organized, because the midterm is a timed exam, but you're allowed, I mean, it's open notes because I can't control that. So how this chart works, we find centi. Centi is 10 to negative 2. That means it equals that. So that's something you can think about. You can put a little equal sign on every single one of those. So that would mean 1 centiliter, you can't have C by itself, is 10 to negative 2 liters. That's how I'm going to do it to be consistent going with the chart. If you're having trouble with metric, I recommend using the chart. There are a couple of you who I could tell from doing the lab, and I can't remember, that you do it as 1 liter over 100 centiliters, and you were getting them all right that way, and that's fine. But if you're having trouble, go with the chart, and this is how the chart works. Another thing that can help is crossing out units. You don't have to. Once you get the flow, you just stop doing that. But if you're struggling still, do that. Now you pull the unit down, and all of you have got that pattern, which is the key. And so if you use my conversions, you just eventually know them. The US always gets the 1 in the US metric, and for my conversions that I give you, and these all have 4 Sig Figs. Oh yeah, we have to talk about Sig Figs. And then quarts to pints. There were a handful of US conversions you need to know, and this would be one of them. And again, next week, I'll go through again which ones you should know. Quarts to pints, so 2 pints in a quart, 4 quarts in a gallon. Sig Figs. There were a lot of you who got it, and then there were a handful of you on the lab that were all over the place. So what determines your Sig Figs is the numbers I give you. So these numbers up here, between US and metric, they all have 4. So we're not going to have more than 4 if we use them. So this number has 4 Sig Figs. And then the numbers that I give you in the problem. So this number has 3. So my answer has 3 Sig Figs. US to US is exact. It does not limit your Sig Figs. And the metric is exact. So you don't have to write this down, but you can, or if you're somebody who struggled with Sig Figs, hopefully as we go over this, it will start making sense. I just keep going unless somebody has a question. All right, this one, I recommend writing seconds as sec rather than just an S. And you don't want to use a slash. You want 1 unit on each layer. By the way, on number 1, there was a blank here. And again, if you don't like the blank, draw a picture there. But if you're ending with only one unit, you're going to have a blank at the beginning. All right, this one's not going to have a blank. You could go meters to centimeters to inches to feet to miles, or I give you kilometers to miles. So I'm going to go meters to kilometers and then kilometers to miles. So that gets me halfway there. Kilo is 10 to the third or 1,000. So that number goes on the bottom. So again, with this chart, kilo means 10 to the third. So 1 kilo is 10 to the third meters. You'll always put the units in, and then the conversion just goes with the piece. And again, I am recording this, so if you're trying to furiously write everything down, realize it is recorded. And then you can go back on a recording. You can stop me. US gets the one with my conversions, 1.609. All right. Now I have to change the seconds to hours. So most of you got this on the first page on the lab. There were a couple people who did it as 2 different pieces or did some weird stuff. This unit's canceled, now has to move to the top. If you want, you can go straight to hours. I'm going to do that here because I don't think I did before. So my seconds will cancel and I can go to hours. Do not, if you write 60, you're going to get the wrong answer because there's 60 seconds in a minute. There's going to be 60 times 60, so 3,600. That is exact. That doesn't limit you. Again, it's the numbers I give you. So that's why my answer has 2 sig figs. The other comment, there were 2 people who wrote the answer on the lab. There was one like this, and they wrote as MPH. Do not do that. I will mark it wrong in the future. MPH, everywhere else in the world, means meters per hour. And so the abbreviation for miles is MI. So a lot of this is about clearly communicating, showing your work. I absolutely realize there's other ways to do this, but that's what we're learning about here. All right, the next one. There are 2 pieces of information. So if you have not bought yourself a colored pen of some sort, I would, or pencil, something that you can erase, underline the information and start with the one that has 1 unit. This has 2 units, the per, so it means I'm going to use it somewhere in my factor label. So get used to, you will often have a blank at the very beginning. Also, because we're going to 1 unit, that's why I start with 1 unit. All right, I'm going to do it again, miles to kilometers. I didn't realize the first 3 questions all did that. If you keep practicing using my conversions, you just eventually know them. They're there as a backup, but you'll know them. And then I'm going to go to meters. So kilo means 10 to the third or 1,000. And then this flips over. For the unit to cancel, the 3.14159 meters moves to the bottom, and 1 second per always means per 1 will be on top, and then 60 seconds to 1 minute. Sig figs, my original number limits me, so 2 sig figs. The other quick comment is rounding. If we're all using these same conversions, we should all get the same answer when we round. So be more conscientious about rounding. The other comment is if you were struggling with the lab and as you did the study set, it also takes time and practice. So as I'm going through this, it will start clicking. It's just finding the time. All right, number 4 is all metric. And there is more than one way to do this, but we're going to do it with unit conversions. And I'm going to show you, I'm just going to try to be consistent because also people try to do shortcuts. They often do funky shortcuts and they did it like half right on the lab. And everybody who did it the way I showed you, they got it. So go to the base unit, change micrograms to grams, and then grams to nanograms. That gets me to nanograms. That cancels these. And now I'm going to go milliliters to liters, and then liters to deciliters. How metric works, that gets me to deciliters. All my other units cancel. When you're working with 2 units, show that your units cancel, and you'll know you have it. The prefix gets the number 1. So 1 micro, 1 nano, 1 milli, 1 deci. Micro is 10 to negative 6. Nano is 10 to negative 9th. It's all on the chart. Milli is 10 to negative 3, and deci is 10 to negative 1. This answer has to be in scientific notation because that is too many zeros to not be. So you can show it like this, or 4.5 times 10 to the 6th. Make sure you always have a unit. All right, the other, probably the most missed thing on the lab was many of you write milli and micro exactly the same. And I'd probably make a comment. If it shows up on the quiz, it will get marked wrong because milli and micro will kill somebody if you're working with dosage and stuff. Oh, somebody is talking, so somebody's not muted. I don't know who's not muted because I can't see all of you, but thank you. Milli is little m. Actually, I have the chart here. And it needs to look like a little m. Mega is capital M, so it's going to be pointed like Mount Hood. And then micro is like Crater Lake. So you can make it a U, or you can do the MCG if it's grams. But just be more conscientious of that. About half of you are showing it beautifully, and about half of you are like not respecting it at all. And that can actually, it will kill somebody because there are 1,000 different. And then same with nano. Nano is 10 to negative 9. All right. So next one, again, 2 pieces of information. So don't automatically start with the first piece. Start with the one that has 1 unit. Keep this in mind when you do the quiz. So having done the quiz right before class, I made the choice to give you guys the whole day to do the quiz. You lose the advantage of being able to ask me questions. Unless I have an office hour again tonight at 6. Sometimes I'm on like 10 minutes early. So if you have another class, you can see if I'm on there. It's a different link. It's on our Blackboard. I also am in here before the class, and the quiz posts at 8 o'clock in the morning, I believe, on Tuesdays. So if you've got your homework or most of the homework, you can always take a stab at the quiz. And then during class time, I won't answer questions unless I made a terrible mistake. All right, I'm going to go to Quartz, and I know I'm going to go to Quartz because that's how I get to metric. And the key here is we're trying to get to the metric unit. So 2 pints to a quart. Pint size means small, so pint is the small unit. So there's 2 of them in a quart, and then the quart's the 0.9463. So those will be the 4 conversions that will be there. And then I'm going to go to milliliters because we want to use this piece of information. So milli is 10 to negative 3. And then this just comes in exactly how it is, 1.234 grams to 1 milliliter. It doesn't flip over because I don't need it to. The units work out. So again, the slash means over 1 milliliter. A question came up earlier and somebody asked, I get confused if the 1 goes on top or the bottom. The 1 goes with the unit it goes with. So you first have to get the units on the right level, and I think all of you have got that down. Again, I like to write where I'm going, or else I don't know when to stop. So 10 to the 3rd grams to 1 kilogram. 4 Sig Figs, because the numbers I gave you had 4, my conversions have 4, so we're going to keep 4. All right, next one also has two pieces of information. So 5, 6, and 7 are all density problems. It doesn't matter, it's just another unit conversion in chemistry. So it's a bridge between mass and volume. So even if you did these and you got them right, I know the other question that has often come up in the past is I will have a student say, well, I did that and I got this answer, but I didn't do it in the same order that I did here. So they started with the 1.234 grams. It doesn't actually really matter the order you do it in. It matters you have the correct numbers on top and the correct numbers in the denominator, since it's all multiplying and dividing. And probably the other most missed thing, I have like this huge list apparently, is punching it in your calculator. So if you feel like you did it right, but you're not getting my answer, just punch it in again, because 98% of the time, that's all it was. All right, I'm going to change my pounds to grams. So the 453.6. And for those of you who sincerely did the lab and this homework and went back, I recommend you go back and redo the notes. Whether you watch the video again or not, you guys have a huge advantage because you can go back and watch the lecture again, especially if you're having trouble sleeping. All right, the key on this one is our next step is the 10.4. But the 10.4 goes in the denominator because that's how the grams cancel. So again, density is always mass per volume. That's what your lab's about this week. So it's always mass over volume. But when we do unit conversions, it can flip upside down so the units cancel. All right, you do not cube that step. That step stays how it is. And then I'm going to inches. So you can do this next step one of two ways. So on this side, I'm going to do it this way. And it depends on you visually. You have to change the centimeters to inches, so you can either cube just this step, or you can show this step 3 times with its units. And we end up with 3 Sig Figs. So this would be the only step you do 3 times. This is a really common question. Dimensions are the only thing you can cube. So centimeters, inches, meters. You cannot cube a mass. You can't cube a density then. So you can't cube the 10.4. You can ponder that. So don't go crazy with cubing. Any questions on the first page? I also eventually today scan my answer key and I will post it under the week 2. You'll have to scroll down. But I did that last week. So if there's something you missed, some people visually like looking at it. But I'm in class until late. So sometimes that doesn't happen until Wednesday. All right. And I'll keep doing that as long as it's not abused for some reason. All right, osmium. This is like question, I think it was 6 and 14 on your lab. So many of you got a comment, sorry, that you didn't show your work properly. And this is what I mean by showing your work. Your first box has to have my numbers that I give you in them. I don't care that this equals 60 cubic inches. I want to see the numbers that I gave you. So you can show them that way, or you can show it in parentheses 5 times 4 times 3 and then inches cubed on the outside. All right, the next step is a step you either have to do 3 times, like I showed on the previous page. This time the 2.5 is on top because that's how the units work, or you have to cube the step. And I will tell you, those of you who put the cube out here and forgot to cube the number, you got your answers wrong on the lab. So if you're going to cube it, cube the number and the unit. I don't want to know that this is 16 point something because that is not very precise. You want to actually learn to put it in your calculator as 2.54 to the third power, because then you're not rounding, because every time you round, it makes it off just a little bit more. And that can end up being a problem. I went to cubic centimeters because you may or may not have noticed chemists like cubic centimeters, milliliters. All right, the other comment, not many, like 1, 2 people did on the lab is they just figured, oh, I'm gonna move my place value because I'm super duper smart at metric. You'll get it marked wrong or partially wrong. You need to use the numbers I'm giving you have to be in your work. All right, centigrams to kilograms. Again, some of you did this in one step, and good for you. It actually usually takes longer because you're thinking about it, and half the time you got it wrong. So just go centigrams to grams, grams to kilogram. Centi and kilo get the 1. You look at the chart, centi means 10 to negative 2. Kilo means 10 to the third. 3 Sig Figs, because all the numbers I gave you in the problem had 3 Sig Figs. All right, there's a question that came up before class. And this Anthony had asked me, he is practicing scientific notation. So he gave his answers in scientific notation, every single one of them, which is fine, like on the homework for practice. When you do the real thing, I recommend keeping it normal notation, because if you mess up your scientific notation, then you just lost points. But on the homework, I'm just looking to see that you made an effort. Question number 4 has to be in scientific notation. So again, once we get to 4, 5, 6, 20 zeros, you need to use scientific notation. But again, on study sets, if you're practicing, but really all these other numbers, except for number 4, would not be shown in scientific notation. Scientific notation is an efficiency thing, and that would not be efficient for anything but number 4. But again, you can. I recommend, though, on quizzes and exams, you go with normal notation unless I specify, like I do down here on number 10. All right, number 8. When you do dosage, I actually gave you the hint here. These hints disappear eventually. You start with the body weight, underline your pieces of information. And I mentioned this before when I did a problem like this. Our bodies, gnomes' bodies, fairies, whatever, they're large. So we talk about it in pounds, or everywhere else on this planet, it's in kilograms. And I'm sure the aliens even talk about it in kilograms. So when you get to grams, then go to kilograms when you're working with dosage. And again, it just takes practice. Sorry, can't remember my conversion. And then kilo is 10 to the third, and then you bring the dosage in. You don't flip the dosage. You keep it like that. They are confusing because they're a mass over a mass, but this is the drug. The drug is always a small amount, and this is the gnome. So you can label it as more. You can say milligrams of the drug, and then we just go, a milligram is 10 to the third. Sorry, 10 to the negative 3 grams. And you should get 3.3. All right. Question 9 is metric. E and F, oh, it just lined up funny, are milli. So M, making your M look like an M. 10 to the third is kilo, which is a K. 10 to negative 2 is centi. 10 to negative 6. You gotta learn to make it look like a micro. You can make it a U. That's perfectly fine. That's how it used to be shown. So again, it's like Crater Lake. It's a volcano that has already exploded and it's lost all of its insides. And 1/10 would be deci, 10 to negative 1. All right, question 10 came from a midterm question. And again, we'll talk about that next week. It's 2 weeks off. So from smallest to largest, micros are smallest. So you're going to go micro is smaller than milli, which is smaller than kilo. On the next one, centi is my smallest, so centi, deci, kilo. On the next one, nano. So nano, micro, centi. Now, of course, you can do this with the chart, but if you do all this work and go back and do it again, it's not meant as a punishment. It's meant to help you to get it. I don't remember if I mentioned this in this class. I'm getting emails from my students from the summer, from last year, and they're telling me how much they miss the work that I gave them. They're in organic chem and physics, and they're like, we have nothing. And our teachers aren't available and won't answer our questions, and then they don't go over it. We just submit it. All right. So I recommend you do it again, that you take notes. And again, it's always up there on the video. And you can always send me an email. All right. So number 10 is because you guys need practice with metric. 7.25, again, I'll just set up the first one. You can do it in one step, but 1 decimeter, we would say, is 10 to negative 1 meters, and 10 to negative 3 meters is, 1 millimeter. Some of you can see it without doing it, so it would be 7.25 e to the second, or times 10 to the second. The next one would be 3.3 times 10 to the 6th milligrams. The next one, we're going to have 6. So the difference from milli to nano is 6, but then you have to move your place value. So if you wrote your answer as 413 times 10 to the 6th, that would get marked wrong. That is not scientific notation. It is engineering notation, but we're not in engineering class. It is 4.13 times 10 to the 8th. And this one, again, if you do 62, the difference is by 4. It would be negative 4. So when you move it over, your calculator will move it correctly. So you can always put it in your calculator. It will be 6.2 times 10 to the negative 3 centigrams. And that's it, unless there's a question. And again, your homework's graded on that. You made an effort. I would rather have you turn it in late and lose a point than to rush and try and, right, that's why it's only 1 point. If there's no questions, I'm going to stop recording.